Greetings and good morning to everyone. I'm addressing you today from Berlin. It has been an amazing summer for myself, being able to travel and teach, and many of you will have been to some of the programs that I was teaching over the summer. And it feels like an appropriate time for me to share some thoughts about this particular Harvest of Peace day. I personally just want to make connection with all of you at your centers and where you may be viewing this. It's really wonderful that everybody has gathered, and I'm personally delighted to be able to communicate some ideas and experiences that hopefully will be meaningful to you. And before we do that, I would like to send the warmest greetings from the Sakyong Mipham, Jessen Drukmo and Jessen Yudra, and our newest one, Jessen Zedrin. They're all doing well. And last year at the same time, I had more family around me, but today you just get me. I would like to address you about the notion of household and how we live. And so even if we live in a very simple accommodation, and if we're living in a more busy and more sort of expanded lifestyle, no matter how we're living, the basic notion of household is something that is, I believe, a very core message of Shambhala. Traditionally, the kingdom of Shambhala, as it is depicted in many tankas that are centuries old, depict many households and many small houses that surround the Rigden, and the Rigden as being a sense of enlightened rulership and living. And the Rigden himself manifests with the Rigden queen and family. And so at the very heart of Shambhala is very much this notion of household. So the notion of household may seem very far from our everyday life, and especially when you look at the world. There are many sort of heartbreaking and sort of challenging issues going on, whether it be in the environment, in political world, and health, education, many areas in the world. And so I think one of the things that as Shambhala over the years, we've been slowly involving ourselves with these sort of global issues. And even though that is incredibly important and something that in a sense we have to be part of and cannot avoid, I also feel like at the sort of immediate level, sometimes we do become overwhelmed by what is happening in the world. And sometimes we feel helpless in terms of what we can do. And sometimes we do participate in different activities and ways of engaging. But at the same time, I feel like household is a way that all of us can participate. And in particular, I think the notion of household is not so much sort of our exactly how we manage just our personal life, and that's separated from the world. But the notion of actually, as Shambhala, the notion of household is very much connected with the power and confidence we feel in the very principle of basic goodness, human dignity, and that how we live our life day to day is an expression of a cultural confidence. So for all of us right now, I feel like as practitioners and warriors within the Shambhala tradition, we want to really look at how we can actually investigate and sort of examine really how we are living. So one of the most powerful things about household is that how we live within our home and the attitude by which we live is very powerful. And therefore, the home becomes a really expression of who we are and what we are. And so it is not just about necessarily just the details of how we arrange our life, even though that's important, but it is very much that relating to how we relate to our home, the rooms in our home, how we relate to food, how we relate to conversation, how we relate to all these elements are actually building sort of an invisible environment by which we are swimming in and engaged in. And all these elements, which we may think of as mundane or worldly, are actually very, very powerful generators of energy. And so how we relate to actually our dressing process and how we relate to the food and the whole thing is very much creating a culture of how we participate. And obviously in a modern world, everything is very quick, efficient, and there's always a sense of rushing and doing the next thing. But through practice and through the notion of mindfulness and through the notion of awareness and the notion of lungta, we realize that it's very important to be present. We can't always be just planning for the next thing. And so culture is really about, in our home, is about how we actually manifest and how we live. And obviously for us, there's a sense of renewal in terms of rest and relaxation. There's notions of entertainment, how we enjoy. There's also notions of sharing, what we like to express. There's a notion of deepening in terms of our own spiritual path and meditation. There's also the notion of imagination and how we come with new ideas and themes. So all these are very important, and we need to balance them. And from this point of view, if we are not trying to move the culture, our own culture, in a particular direction, then naturally how we live is just a reaction to everything else going on from the outside. So our home never feels like we are really sort of moving forward, but always just reacting. So as a culture that is relating to basic goodness of ourselves, basic goodness of others, the notion of basic goodness of society, how can we actually use the home, our own living situation, as the progenitor and the basis of this kind of culture? And how do you actually relate to space and relate to the environment from a point of basic goodness? So I think these elements are already existing, and we are very much at a whim where people are trying to live a good life as much as possible, and that we're very much engaged in that generally. And for most of us, obviously, we sometimes feel like things are going well, sometimes things are not going well. But regardless of the whole kind of ups and downs of life, which are, a natural part of our existence, how can we have an underlying theme of journey, of vision, of meaning, of principle? And how can we take these principles and actually engage in it? So naturally, I think it's a balance between discipline and relaxation. We have to have a sense of the discipline of living. When I asked my father what his favorite word was, he said discipline. And so I think it's not just a matter of being narrow-minded or uptight, but the notion of actually engaging in things that are actually raising our energy in lungta, as opposed to just thinking that we can sort of get by without putting any energy or effort. And at the same time, how do you overcome this notion of perpetually engaging in sort of overworking or over exhausting ourselves? So those are elements that we have to balance. And so some of these themes are very much we'll be exploring the rest of our life, but it's also something I feel like within the Shambhala Center, within our own home situation, we can discuss. And I'm especially happy this year that at Enlightened Society, many of the other programs, that we actually have Shambhala household texts and ways of working with this. So these are themes that are essential in terms of how we embody these principles. So in this way, another element of household is very much the notion of balance. How do we have balance in our life? And this is something that I think is challenging everyone in terms of our own practice, our own work, how we relate with inner development of our personal sense of purpose, and how we relate to externally. So this is very much something that I feel like is sort of one of the primary sort of challenges of modern living, is balancing. Once we are out of balance, then we are continuously trying to make up for the balance. And I believe there has to be a balance of how we relate to our own self, our own self-identity of who we think we are and how we manage ourselves, how we relate to other, the balance of self and other. There's a balance of practice and living. There's a balance of view and action. Then there's literally the balance throughout the day. So one of the tools that we have in the Shambhala tradition is we have the principles of what we do in the morning in terms of vision, what we do in the afternoon, what we do in the evening. And so the days are divided up according to our own sense of how we live. So there's a sense of vision in the morning, a sense of engagement in the afternoon, and a sense of rest and renewal in the evening. As well, how we relate to all the aspects of our rooms in our house, how we relate to the different activities that we do. So all of these can be actually imbued and engaged in with the principles that we have. And so this is something that is essential for all of us. And I believe that a balance is something that has to happen on a daily basis. It's not a trick that we discover once and are able to apply to everything. There's a balance of how we relate to the week, how we relate to the month, how we relate to the year. There's a balance of how we're relating to our food, how we're relating to conversation, all these elements. And so, generally speaking, with balance, there's some kind of harmony, and harmony has to do with a sense of strength and renewal, and very much a sense of wind horse. And so, whether we're in a leadership position, whether we're just engaging in practice, we can try to look at how we are balancing with these principles. And at the heart of it is very much the notion of energy, lungta, and spirit. So this is an element that is hopefully something that everybody can look at and engage in. And so these elements of culture, how we manifest personally and the confidence that we have in order how to live. So it doesn't just stay in our head and our heart, just internally, but how we actually manifest. It is actually household. And for myself, household is really the sort of the seed of creating enlightened society. If we as Shambhalians can carry the culture of basic goodness in our homes, then each of us creates that energy, as opposed to it just being at the Shambhala center or just in our meditation. But actually, our living becomes an example of it. And so for most of us, we are challenged by our life, and so this is an opportunity for us to be able to reverse that process. So these are some of the thoughts and themes that I wanted to share today and hopefully have you contemplated. And so if you have a discussion and able to share experiences in real life where you feel like it's in balance or out of balance, how the elements can be engaged in, and how we have an opportunity to actually lead life with the inherent principles that we are so enriched by within the Shambhala wisdom. So please enjoy this day and this transition, and it's an excellent time to reflect on sort of how you are going forward. This has been a wonderful opportunity for me to address all of you and to send my love and blessings. And I know many of you are engaged in many, many positive things, and some of you are very much challenged by what is happening in your life. So I hope some of these principles that I talked about are helpful to you. And so, on that note, good morning, and I look forward to seeing you soon, and I will keep all of you in my thoughts and prayers.